It's Steph Strickland with another EAA Spirit of Aviation Week segment as part of our EAA Together coverage. I want to introduce you now to Matt Younkin. Matt, thank you so much for making the time. Your air show experience and the performance that you put on have thrilled so many people. I'm just glad you would make the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and look forward to a good conversation.
Let's start by talking about the thing that people know about you the most, and then we'll talk about some of the other stuff and the history behind your family's legacy in aviation. You fly this night routine, which is where a lot of people, that's what really stands out in this Beech 18. What is this Beech 18 equipped with, and when it's flying at night with all the lights just looking so gorgeous?
Yeah, it's a 1943 twin Beech 18. It's bone stock. We haven't made any modifications to the airplane or anything like that. We just lightened it up as best we could. No pun intended. And after I perfected my daytime routine in it, I was sitting around the hangar with my crew chief one night looking at this thing, and we decided, you know what? If all the lights that this airplane left the factory with, if they all actually worked, we'd be halfway to a night show or night performance in this airplane. And the idea started flowing, and pretty soon I'd come up with a concept and he would make it happen. And, it just went from there. So it's been quite an adventure. We tried to design the airplane to where it glows in the dark when you're looking at the top side, but the bottom side twinkles. So there's a lot of contrast there. And paired that with a powerful soundtrack that only the twin Beech can fly to, and try to keep it short and sweet. Want people coming back for more.
Do you know off the top of your head how many lights and strobes and how much stuff you had to get working on that airplane to make her look so beautiful?
Yeah, let's see. Total light fixtures, I think we have 49 light fixtures on the aircraft. We counted the LED bulbs and some of the fixtures and came up with several hundred. I can't remember. That was for some Facebook trivia thing we did one time. But so we've got, let me think, there's 4 forward-facing Lopresti boom beam HID lights. We've also got those in the windows that shine down on the wings. We've got them on the top of the fuselage that shine on the tail. We've got 13 strobe lights from Wheelan Engineering underneath the aircraft, as well as LED beacons and LED recognition light for the nose art, and LED navs and that sort of thing. So anyway, it's we put all the lights on it that we figured it needed to pull off the performance, and it seems to be working just fine.
You need to rent her out for rock concerts because that type of lighting system seems like it'd be perfect for that. What are some of the considerations that you have as a pilot when you're flying at night? Obviously, the challenges are very different than when you're flying during the day. Let's give the av geeks who are watching this some understanding of what you do to prepare mentally and then actually fly the routine at night.
Well, the night show is a lot more challenging in different ways than the daytime show. And the challenge is one of the things I love about it. I've got 17 switches and a rotary dial in the airplane that I use to choreograph the light show with the music. And I'm actually listening to the soundtrack as I'm flying the airplane and making the changes to the lights and the maneuvers accordingly, so that the routine starts and stops at the appropriate time, and all of the passes are done with the type of precision that you want in mind to kind of make the lights and the music dance together. So there's a lot going on there, but it's challenging, and the challenge is what makes it so much fun. As far as doing aerobatics at night, that's a little bit different. Luckily, most night shows, the weather is either absolutely perfect or so terrible that they cancel the show. There's very rarely any in between. But when there is, the horizon goes away. So when the moon and the stars aren't out and you've got kind of a hazy evening, or you've got an overcast layer above you, you actually have to build a horizon based on street lights and traffic that's moving down a road next to the airport. And I'll actually use my instruments to reset the for the next maneuver, just depending on how the layout of the land around the airport is. So it can be challenging, but it's something you prepare for ahead of time. And that's all there is to it.
Forgive me if this sounds like a dumb question, but I'm really curious about this. From the time that you decide to fly a night routine, do you start by putting it together, probably obviously in the day, and then do you slowly transition through the evening hours, twilight, civil twilight, into dark? Or how do you get yourself into the nighttime routine from a practice standpoint when you initially decided you wanted to do this?
Well, you learn the maneuvers during the daytime when you can see real well, and pick your outs and your back doors for all of that stuff. And then once you've got that figured out, doing them after dark can be a little bit different. It's nice to practice on a night when all the stars are out and the moon's glowing full and you can see everywhere. And but the maneuvers don't change depending on whether the sun's up or down. It still takes a minimum airspeed to start the pull for a maneuver and a minimum altitude at the bottom and at the top to complete the maneuver, to complete it safely. And if you don't have your numbers anywhere in the middle of that, you back out. You just don't do it, or you abort the maneuver and move on to the next one. So if you keep all of that safety related stuff in mind, when you're building a sequence, and you build it with energy management in mind as well, then typically if you start the sequence, you'll be able to finish it without any issues.
Why a Beech 18?
Well, I can't take credit for that. My dad did air shows in the Beech 18 for 15 years before he passed away. But the reason I wanted to continue with the Beech 18 is because of all the airplanes he flew. It was the one everybody really remembered him for. It was the one that put him on the forefront of the air show circuit as one of the top tier performers. Also, there has been a Beech 18 in my family since way before I was ever in my family. My parents' first date was to go to the local airport and watch the twin Beech mail planes start up and take off into the night. And when they got married, they moved to South Dakota, where my dad took his first job flying night airmail in Beech 18s. And he did that for two different companies. Then he came home and borrowed some money and bought one of his own, and he hauled freight in it till I was a teenager. And eventually he ended up doing air shows in another Beech 18 as well. So the concept is something that I can't take credit for. I've just been privileged enough to get to carry it on.
That's a really touching story. I really love that. Given that you have this, 3 generations in your family and this deep bench of aviators, take me back to when you were a young kid and your first solo. There's a lot of folks who are going to watch this who are at some point either still getting their private pilot's license or they are moving on to, maybe an instrument rating or something beyond. But we all have that first solo story. Tell me about yours.
Well, I learned to fly at age 14 from a family friend in a Piper Cub, but you can't solo till you're 16. So closer to my 16th birthday, the same man that taught my dad how to fly refined my piloting skills and got me ready to solo. And I was privileged enough to solo my grandpa's 1928 Travel Air 4000 biplane on my 16th birthday. So it was quite a memorable experience. For starters, it was 19 degrees outside, and I had 4 or 5 layers of clothes on and a big heavy jacket over some coveralls over that, and it was still cold. But I remember my instructor got in the airplane with me that morning, and we went out, and we're going to do just a few more landings before he turned me loose. And we came in, and I bounced that thing to the moon. I mean, I hit the mains first, and the nose went up, and then it kind of pancaked on, and then it was stripe to stripe trying to keep it on the pavement. It was just awful. And he said, "All right, let's go back." Well, shoot, I screwed this up. So anyway, we go back, and he stops on the taxiway and gets out. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Are you ready to solo? You're going to go solo." I said, "You mean after that?" He said, "We were going to do touch and goes for an hour until you made one of those because I wanted to see that you could recover from a bad landing. So thanks for getting that out of the way early because it's cold out here. Now go solo the airplane." And anyway, I remember as I was taking off, I got the tail in the air and the mains are still on the ground. And I'm thinking, I can still back out. I don't have to do this. I can back out. The next thing I know, I'm 20 feet in the air. I told myself, well, I guess you're committed now. And anyway, it went out and came back around and made a beautiful landing. And that was my first solo flight in an airplane. And it was really incredible.
That's one of the best solo stories I've ever heard. And I've got this vision of you at the controls like the kid from A Christmas Story, with all the layers of clothes on. He can't put his arm.
I can't put my arms down. It was almost that bad. And I'll tell you, there's a little bit more to that story. So the airplane that I soloed, the Travel Air, it was my grandfather's first of many, many aviation restorations. He restored that airplane in the mid-'70s. My dad put the paint and the fabric on it. My dad covered the airplane because he was better at dope and fabric work than my grandfather was. And anyway, I got to solo it on my 16th birthday. My dad also used that movie in the that airplane in the Tuskegee Airmen movie that came out on HBO back in the mid-'90s. It's in the opening scene of that movie. And all these years later, my dad and my grandfather are no longer here, and I still have that airplane. It's in my hangar, and my kids are going to have to figure out what to do with it because it's never leaving my family as long as I'm around.
This is actually a great segue into talking about the Pacer and the story behind the Pacer as it relates to EAA. While there are planes that you hold close to you, there's also planes that you and your family are willing to share with aviation enthusiasts from around the world. Tell me the story about the Pacer.
Well, it goes back to the Travel Air mystery ship. My grandfather, after he built the Travel Air 4000 we were just talking about, his next project was a home-built replica of a Travel Air mystery ship, which is a 1930s air racer. It won the 1929 National Air Races, the very first civilian aircraft to do that against all the military competitors. Anyway, Grandpa built a replica of this airplane and brought it to Oshkosh in 1979. And everybody knew who Jim Younkin was from the autopilot world, but they did not figure him to be an airplane builder. So he shows up in this airplane, and sure enough, it's got a state-of-the-art IFR panel in it with a Century autopilot that my grandfather designed back in the 60s and anyway incorporated it into this home built of his. And he ended up with a lot of notoriety over that. And many years later, after he'd built several other airplanes like the Mr. Mulligan and restored clipped wing monocoups and stagger wings and all this other stuff, he decided that he wanted a Pacer. He'd always had a fascination with a Piper Clipper or a Pacer. They're basically the same airplane. And he ended up with a project. It was a tri-Pacer that he converted into the Pacer that you guys see now. But Grandpa doesn't just restore airplanes. He makes them better than the factory ever dreamed of making them. So Grandpa's Pacer has gap seals and fairings and all kinds of little tweaks to it to make it go way faster than a regular Pacer. And it's also got twice as much fuel capability in a Jim Younkin autopilot, as you can imagine. And anyway, he finished that Pacer up, and he and his wife traveled in that airplane all over the country for many, many years, just enjoying each other's company and enjoying the fly-ins that they were going to and all that. Grandpa's Pacer was featured in sport aviation like many of his other airplanes were. And anyway, the resulting popularity of the airplane inspired a lot of other people to restore Pacers, and they actually put his paint scheme and they put his modifications, his gap seals and his fairings and his wheel pants and all of the little things that he created to make that airplane his own. A lot of people copied him. So there's a lot of Pacers out there that have Jim Younkin in them one way or the other. So it just seemed like, EAA is about inspiring people to build their own airplanes or take airplanes and make them theirs by modifying them in certain ways. And the Pacer just seemed to be a very good example of what my grandfather was able to do with an airplane to make it better. And the family colors that are on it, he painted it up like the mystery ship, which was his first restoration. And And he ended up building a Molly Coupe later in life, a scratch-built airplane that is also painted in those colors. And then he had an RV-10 that he did his autopilot work with when he founded True Track Flight Systems and started doing digital autopilots that was also painted red with black scallops. And all of my dad's air show airplanes ended up being red and black, and I'm still flying a red and black Twin Beech today. And it all dates back to that first restoration of the Travel Air Mystery Ship, or the replica that he built in '79, and then the Pacer that followed that.
Well, I know EAA appreciates the donation of that airplane, and especially what it represents, again, to all the people who are out there improving their airplanes, building their airplanes, showing up to AirVenture to be a part of that experience. What has AirVenture meant to you over the years?
It is one of the most it's one of the most special experiences I get to have every year with my family, and it's been that way since I was a little kid. And my family's changed over the years, and I have new members that weren't there back then, and other members that aren't with us anymore. But AirVenture has always just been, it's meant the world to us in that way. My grandfather obtained notoriety within the antique aircraft circles at EAA. He used to hold court on the steps of the Red Barn out there by Theater in the Woods. And he and the antiquers would all hang out and do their thing. And then my dad ended up on the air show stage with the Twin Beech that he started flying shows in, and then Samson and Super Decathlon and some other airplanes that he had flown over the years. And so he ended up making a name for himself as an air show performer at Oshkosh. And then all these years later, when the night show stuff got popular, and I took Dad's concept and hung a bunch of lights on it and changed it to fly a little bit after dark, as you started this with, now people look for that red and black Twin Beech when they go to Oshkosh. And I've been privileged enough that I feel like it's kind of a staple around there. And it's wonderful to get invited back. And I, like I said, going back to being a family vacation from when I was a kid, it still is. Now I take my family, and we sit in the campgrounds around the fire in the evening and talk about airplanes and enjoy each other's company, much the way that I always intended to growing up there. It's hollow ground, and I'm honored that they have me back to continue to perform there every year.
You're absolutely a crowd favorite. I want to talk about one of the things that makes EAA and AirVenture and really so many air shows so unique, and that is the volunteer base that really propels these events into existence. It takes an army to bring this many people together in one location to experience all facets of aviation. But there's a particular volunteer who has always gone above and beyond with you, and you wanted to spend a moment saying thanks. And I think that's so very awesome. So tell me a little bit about your volunteer experience with EAA.
Well, there's a lot of volunteers that we deal with on a regular basis up there every year about this time. But there's one guy that stands out in particular, and his name is Brian Lorenz. He goes by Zippy. And if Zippy is wearing his little reflective vest that has the radio, the thing that comes over the top of it, and he's running around on the ramp like a cat on a hot tin roof, that your job as a performer is going to be a lot easier, because he's going to make sure that nobody parks in the way of anybody else. There's not going to be a traffic jam. The fuel and the smoke oil is going to get there on time. There's any other issues that you have or needs that you have. If you don't have time to go figure it out yourself, call Zippy. And Zippy, it doesn't matter what it is, he'll get it taken care of. And I've been, privileged enough to work with him at several other shows around the country. When I show up and there's Zippy on the ramp, it drops the stress level down. And it all started with Oshkosh. And I really don't think that there's too many people that can do what he does as efficiently as he does it, running the air show ramp at Oshkosh. So anyway, you gave me the opportunity to give a shout out to somebody, and that's the volunteer that has meant very, very much to me over the years.
Well, so to Zippy and to all of the EAA volunteers who are watching this, EAA thanks you. It is a monumental effort, and everyone from running things hot side to the folks who are responsible for making sure the trash gets emptied, all of it happens because of you. So thank you. You've talked a lot about your family, your dad, and your grandfather in a flying capacity, but there's something else that you guys all shared as a passion, and that's music. Tell me about that.
Well, that's also true. I'm also a third generation musician. My grandfather played clarinet and tenor sax. He was actually in a jazz band in the United States Army playing the saxophone, and that's how he got the GI Bill and put himself through college. But my dad was a very gifted trumpet player. He could play like Louis Armstrong or Harry James. So he had the Dixieland sound that you can imagine, plus the that incredible open tone that Harry James and Doc Severinsen used. He could play anything. And I learned how to play trombone at an early age, and I'm still playing it. I still enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, and my family doesn't seem to mind when I'm playing my horn around the house. My son is my biggest fan at that point because he wants to play too. And anyway, it's just, music has always been something that's been very special to my family and I. And that was one of the things that we had in common. When I got to play Dixieland music with my dad and my grandpa at the same time, at the same location, that was one of the most memorable moments I've ever had in my life. It was just incredible. So, yes, I love music, and we all do.
I have a vision of your son just, marching around the house with his air trombone.
Right? Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I want to talk about how you made your way into aerobatic flying. It was in a super decathlon, right?
That's correct.
Tell me about that process.
Well, so I never wanted to be an air show pilot. It was not in the cards for me. It's not something I ever aspired to be. It's kind of hard to, have the desire to get into professional golf if Tiger Woods is your daddy. I mean, how are you ever going to measure up? And unfortunately, my dad was lost in an accident in 2005, and there was a financial need for my brother-in-law and I to get in the airplanes and go fly off the deposits that he had taken on shows that he couldn't fulfill because the family couldn't afford to pay him back. And so we had the Super Decathlon. He bought it. He had a dealership, and he demonstrated the airplane's capabilities at Oshkosh and Sun and Fun every year. And he took me out in it twice, I think it was, to do some aerobatics. He wanted to teach me slow rolls because the slow roll is the basis for most aerobatic maneuvers. And he always said that if you can master a slow roll, you can master anything. Well, I never did get very good at doing those slow rolls. And he got so frustrated with me. We come back to the airport, and, learning from your father is difficult anyway because there seems to be some kind of a clash in personality, even if your intent as the son is to be humble and listen and try to grasp it as best you can. He just always said there's something about teaching your kid that's just very difficult. Anyway, fast forward, he passed away, and I went back out and got in the Super Decathlon and was going to go do some slow rolls, and I thought, you know what, this is really a tight fit. And I reached down under the seat and pulled the lever and popped the seat back, and all of a sudden I had leg room. So I'm 4 inches taller than my dad was. The airplane was always set up for him. So I'm in the fetal position trying to get my feet to work back and forth, and it just wasn't happening. And I went out and did some slow rolls, and I'll be darned if they didn't work, because there's something about, if the airplane is set up for you, it makes the job a lot easier. And the nice thing was I'd been flying model airplanes for a long time as well. And I learned a lot of aerobatics by flying the models because the stick on the RC transmitter, those do the same thing as the controls of a full-scale airplane. You can make the little airplane do what you want it to do with the same control inputs. So all I had to do was transition myself into being in the airplane instead of standing on the ground watching it go by. And I was able to teach myself with the guidance from the slow rolls and the other stuff that I knew flying models. I was able to teach myself aerobatics. And Dad passed away in July of 2005, and my first show in the Super Decathlon was in November of that same year. And the rest is history.
I know right now the RC model pilots out there are like, yes, Yes, they love hearing that. How many airplanes are you proficient in now?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's hard to say that you're ever proficient in an airplane. There's always something to be learned.
Your bio says 85.
I have flown 85 different types of airplanes. I'm probably going to have to change that word proficient and pull it out of there because that's false advertising. But I've been honored to fly 85 different types of airplanes to date. And anyway, they range from, the Cub I learned to fly in to I've gotten to fly both of the B-29s. They're incredible. And a lot of really neat stuff in between. So I've had a very blessed career up to this point in aviation, just being in the right place at the right time to get to experience a lot of this stuff.
Your humility is appreciated, but you just have such a depth of knowledge in aviation. I want to ask you finally.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. This one can sometimes be a little deep. What does flying mean to you?
It's freedom. It is, in every sense of the word, it's freedom. You can leave all of your stress and your worries and your problems and everything on the ground and just, get in a travel air biplane and load your family in the front seat and go out just before sunset and just see what it's like to, have your own wings. It's incredible. It can be some of the most relaxing, but also some of the most stressful work that there is out there, obviously based on the situation. But when I fly for myself and I fly for fun, I do it because it's one of the most relaxing things that I get to experience. And I love it. Absolutely love it.
Matt Younkin, I cannot thank you enough from EAA. Thank you so much for making the time to be a part of this segment.
Yes, ma'am. I'm honored. I really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to seeing you and so many more of my friends in person one of these days when all this stuff is over with.
Preach. I'm here with you for that. For everyone watching EAA's Spirit of Aviation Week, EAA Together content, thank you so much for joining us.
Lightspeed Zulu 3, the most preferred, most awarded headset in general aviation. With decades of providing unsurpassed value and unsurpassed functionality, pilots all over the world love flying with Zulu 3. Try Zulu 3 today, risk-free, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Lightspeed, fly with Zulu.
Hello, my name is Tony Castilleja, and I'm joined with tremendous engineers at Boeing in Space. And we are building the future of human spaceflight with NASA in building NASA's Space Launch System, increasing the amount of time that we're working on the International Space Station in space with astronauts in space, and building the Boeing Starliner to provide transportation to and from NASA's International Space Station. So we're going to talk with some great engineers that are building those systems and building the ecosystem of low Earth orbit and deep space transportation at a place we'd like to call Boeing in Space. And I'd like to start off with my good friend, Brandon Burrows. So Brandon Burrows is a mechanical engineer